Alright, what's up guys? Karel here, StandStrengthX.com, and if you want to stand like an athlete, you got to strength like an athlete. So in today's video, I'm going to be reviewing the Amazon Prime 4-week power building program. The reason why I chose it is I'm a power builder. I'm going to be going through a wide variety of different programs available on LiftVault, simply because it's a pretty good resource of free programs. The internet has a lot of free stuff on it, and it's actually not that bad in terms of the quality of programs that you could get on this site. And like I said, there's a wide variety, so there's a lot of things that you can try, stick to, see what you like, see what you dislike, and see what allows you to train most consistently, right? So overall, that's a really good thing. Next is I already did a review of the power hypertrophy upper lower on this channel as well, and I'm just kind of going down the list of different programs that they recommend for power building. So obviously power building really just means, it can mean a lot of different things really, but generally speaking, it just means that you use the powerlifting movements, the squat, bench, and deadlifts, and you try to build your body using those movements and other bodybuilding accessory movements or exercises and techniques. So overall, not crazy rocket science, not super bad. And let's get into the program. So let's first go over the program overview, and let's kind of discuss the main points within it. So each cycle of the program lasts 4 weeks. That's a pretty good length of a cycle. Personally, I do a 4-week cycle as well. I do think that cycles can be extended out to maybe 6 weeks before needing a deload, potentially 8. It just really depends on the level of the lifter and the type of training they perform. As a power builder, you will need to deload. If you are lifting any amount of substantial amount of weight and you're pushing progression on sets, reps, intensity, you will need to deload. That's just, there's no way of getting around that. You will accumulate a lot of fatigue, and you will need time to let the connective tissues and just your overall mental state just relax and recover. And if you are a bodybuilder, more bodybuilder focused, I don't think you need to deload as much or as frequently, or is not as necessary, for the simple reason that as a bodybuilder, you can choose to not push intensity as one of your factors for muscle growth. Do I think that's optimal? Hell no. I think intensity, even for bodybuilders, more bodybuilder focused athletes, should still be a very important factor of your training. 1 second. All right, sorry about that. But anyway, so next part, the 4th week is a deload week. So like I said, so that means you're going to be doing a 3-week wave followed by a deload week. Not against this at all. This is something that I do for myself as well, for progression. Not a bad idea. This is something that is very common with people who like to base their programs or have been exposed to a very popular program such as 531. And it even mentions here that the layout of this program is quite similar to 531, with a bunch of bodybuilding accessories tacked on. I mean, generally speaking, most programs are kind of really just like that. If you kind of see a program in the wild and the writer of that program thinks that they're Jesus and that they reinvented the wheel in a way that it drives for you, stay away from that person. Chances are the program's not even that good. Their ideas might not be their own, and generally speaking, no one can really say I invented the best way to increase your bench press. Generally, that's something that you have to just work at over time for yourself. So anyway, the focus lift is programmed for +5 reps in the 85% in week 1, 3+ reps 90% in week 2, and 1+ reps at 95% during week 3. I'm not totally against this. I do like the progression of intensity over time. However, to me, it just seems kind of more prone to stagnation, more prone to stalling. You're more likely to reach a plateau here because the rate of progression is a bit too fast. If you think about it, you need to be, in my opinion, more methodical. You need to progress a lot slower. You need to take a lot of time with certain amounts of intensities, and progressing in reps first, and then intensity as the last step of progression. So not really all that bad, but I don't think it's ideal. Next, after the primary movement, a variation is performed. I love that. That's what makes this different from pure powerlifting style training. For example, incline bench press is performed after the bench press. I do something very similar. Front squat is performed after the back squat, and so on. As far as those two pairings, front squat and back squat, nothing too against that, but I do think there's better options given what you might be trying to accomplish for that squat session, but we can get into that later. Finally, 4 or 5 accessory movements are hit for high reps to induce hypertrophy. This is where the building part of power building is achieved. Yes and no. So this is something that I will need to touch on, in my opinion, as a power builder, and that's the fact that if you are a power builder, while you need to really hammer hard the overlap between strength and size, you can't neglect the glaring contradictions between the two. In a more bodybuilding style training program, exercise variation drives a significant amount of the volume you accumulate. And while that is a good thing for bodybuilding, what that does is you only have so much resources to recover from, so much time to use when you're in your training. So is it really optimal to just do basically a power lifter style training in the beginning of the session and then end it with a bodybuilding tacked on and say, hey, look, power building? No. Strength progression is best done depending on how you progress. But generally speaking, powerlifters tend to train in a way where you're doing less exercise variations. You train at somewhat higher intensities for more sets, and you're compensating that with less reps. So that way each rep is crisp, because as a powerlifter, you'll care about overall strength, and strength is a variety of a couple things: neuromuscular efficiency, muscle size. So the factors that you have to take into consideration to progress is different. So doing 4 to 5 accessory movements can be excessive, especially if the movements are redundant and maybe not complete in isolation. So all of your accessory will utilize rate of perceived exertion, RPE. As a reminder, for framework for RPE is included below. Excuse me one more time. So I do like when programs include RPE as part of their system. It's a valid way to auto-regulate training, to kind of teach the lifter to kind of think about how their body is feeling at certain moments, right? So another way to think of RPE is to use reps and reserves, RIR, and subtract. We can go over this in another time and we'll move from there. So should you use a training max? I think so. So as someone who writes programs, as a trainer, generally speaking, what I think is that if you were let's say, should you use a training max? Rather than saying I think so, say for this program yes, for this program no, because obviously in some circumstances it's more appropriate, in other circumstances it's less appropriate. So why not just say, rather than saying I think so, kind of take the context into consideration, so that way when they kind of need to ask themselves in their future training, should I use a training max? And you can say yes because and no because. But that seems to be it for the program overview. So let's go into the actual program. All right, so the actual program. So you get a really nice Google spreadsheet. Impressive. You get a wide variety of different exercises for accessories. You have a place to put into your 1-rep maxes on the squat, bench, and deadlift. Me personally, I would add row to that. Let's see, your workouts 5 days a week. So let's see, legs, push, pull, shoulders, squat, bench press, deadlift, overhead press. So I do prefer a lower upper split, simply because the lower body movements are a lot more taxing. So having them be completed after a rest day, in my opinion, is more optimal. And also I will notice that because I do a lot of upper back rowing movements and movements of that nature on upper body days, that can impede my progression on lower body days, especially on the deadlift. So I like to have deadlift day be first because it's the most taxing. Chances are you rested Saturday and Sunday, so you're the most fresh on Monday. So why not make the day you're the most fresh the day where you do the most taxing lift, and then you move from there. So let's see. On that, more calculators to kind of like give you a perception of where your new 1 rep max is. So overall, the resources in this are pretty good. Pretty good. Let's move into round 1. So I've never seen weeks referred to as rounds. I guess he thinks you're a fighter of some kind. But anyway, looking at this, there is one sticking problem that I do have. And the cells highlighted in gray are optional. So I do think flexibility of a program is necessary for trainees, and usually when it comes to that amount of flexibility, you need to also provide the context of when it is appropriate to add it in. So just saying it's optional, it might like cover your ass to say like, well, I did say it's optional, but you didn't really say like when it should be used. And also, so obviously you only have to do a mandatory of 3 sets. However, if that's the case, what is the point of including all this? Are you going to one day get to a point where you do 6 sets of 6 different exercises? That's excessive, and at that point, are you really power building? Simply because, is the adaptation you're getting at the end of that workout still relevant to improving your 1 rep max? Or are you just bodybuilding suboptimally with powerlifting movements? They are not the same thing. Anyway, you do a set of 10 with 45%, a set of 5 for 55%, 5 again, 5 with 75, 5 with 85, and then I believe you stay at 5 for that. So not really anything bad about that at all. I do think that for progression, as a novice, this is ideal. This is fine, or not really ideal, but just fine. I really do like the idea of evolving rep ranges much more than just trying to do as many sets. So for example, with a system like this where you just do a bit more intensity, a bit more intensity, and a bit more intensity, like each time you do a set of 5, I really would just consider everything up to this point a warm-up. After you reach 85%, like that is your one working set, and you can just call this a 1x5. Everything else before it is just a warm-up. And I do like how you stay at 85% and let's say you hit 5, but one thing I will say is that it should be you hit 5 on it, and then on the next set you try to hit more than 5, and you hit more than 5, progress, add weight. I think that would be a much more efficient system, rather than the next time you drop the amount of reps you go up in intensity. That's changing 2 variables at once, and I think that's suboptimal for overall progression. You want to be trying to manipulate variables as slowly as possible and as selectively as possible. But anyway, let's go over the exercise selection of this program. So, step 1, the first exercise, squat. So I'm sure they mean a high bar squat or low bar squat because they're both back squats. That's fine with me. Next is a pause squat. So let's say, going with this, and just going with how it is written, even though I consider all of this warm-up sets, you just did 6 sets of squats with 85%. Then you are going to do 3 sets of more squats, or up to 6 sets of more squats for 6 to 10 reps. The rep range, I don't have too big of an issue with. What I have an issue with is the fact that you're using a very similar movement pattern with one that you kind of already hammered down with intensity, and the amount of compression on your back, the amount of recovery resources that you'll have to use with this combination is, in my opinion, suboptimal. However, he does give you options. So pause squat, front squat, box squats. I would much rather use a front squat or maybe even a back squat, simply because the way it loads your legs is a lot different. And also, let's say with the example of the front squat, chances are it's going to be a weight that's significantly far in terms of objective weight from the weight that you used for the squat. And in that case, I think that's really good. Now let's go back to the amount of sets and reps that you're doing. So if we are to be generous, we can say that you are doing only 2 hard sets of this movement and 3 hard sets with this movement. And if that being the case, I think that's very appropriate. That's very similar to what I do, where I do 3 hard sets with the main movement and then 2 sets close to failure because I'm trying to accumulate more volume using that second variation. So if that's the case, I think that's really good. However, because of how it's written, it can be perverted in a sense, especially because the weight jumps might be a bit wide. So for example, the stronger you get, and chances are if you're a really strong lifter, you're probably not using a program like this. But 10% jumps can be pretty steep depending on what your Wonder Max is. And also, I just think that when it comes to using these higher percentages, you want to be getting a little bit more touches on the bar. You want to be getting a little bit more volume from it as well. So that way you're building high quality muscle and you're building that strength adaptation and then using this. So overall fine, but could be improved. But overall it's good. This is not to say that I dislike it, but I like it more than I dislike or disagree with it. But anyway, let's go to compound leg accessory, leg press. This is unnecessary. So loading with heavy volume, I mean, the big issue that I see with this is the fact that it's basically a misapplication of using a main lift split. So, 1 second, I apologize for all the interruptions during this video. Alright, and I'm back. So anyway, after our quick commercial break, after doing 2 forms of squats, there's really no purpose to do leg press. And even further than that, there's no reason to do leg extensions. You just accumulated 5 hard sets on the squat, and now you're going to add maybe 6 to 12 more sets for the quads. That's overkill. Like, this really is, like I was saying earlier, a misapplication of the main lift plus accessories split. So a squat day, a bench day, a deadlift day, an overhead press day. That's the way they have this programmed. However, if you look at it, it's just a shoulder day. This is a bro split essentially, with very little accessory thrown in just to get that name of power building. So the squat day, not horrible. The strength progression, not horrible. But the choices of accessories and how they're programmed is suboptimal in my opinion. So like I was saying, you just did a lot of volume on the squat and front squat, and then now you're going to add leg presses and leg extensions to that. I would just go into leg curls or maybe some other hip hinge type movement, like maybe a back extension, maybe a dumbbell Romanian deadlift. And also, if it's not written into the program, I'm going to say it wasn't considered. And supersets. You don't need, like, going from, let's say, leg press to leg curls to leg extensions to calf raises. That's a very doable superset. Or leg press to Romanian deadlifts to calf raises to leg curls. That's a very doable superset. Like, those are mostly isolation exercises, mostly machines. You can do a superset with that, and then you'll save a lot of time, and you might justify having this many exercises into a program or a workout. But like I said, I still don't think this is the best. So while I like the exercise selection, while I like the idea of having accessories, I think that it's a misapplication of what it's supposed to accomplish. So for example, you are getting a lot of work for the chest during the bench press. It does not need more accessories. If anything, what you could do here is do shoulder accessories. You could take a lot of the movements that are here and then put them here instead. And then now you have a muscle protein muscle protein synthesis of 2 times per week for that muscle, rather than putting all the shoulder work on one day, all of the chest on one day. You kind of have a mix of both. Even in a bench and overhead press day, the chest, shoulders, and triceps are all being worked. So what I would do is do the barbell bench press and incline bench press for most of the chest work, maybe one chest exercise such as a chest fly, but this is 3 presses and they're all in the same plane. That's suboptimal in my opinion, and like I said, that's in my opinion, and it's just not how I would personally train. And moving on from there, what you could do instead is, if you were going to do a third press, why not do a dumbbell shoulder press? That to me makes a lot more sense. And if you're wondering why I'm looking up, it's because my TV is right there, but I just realized I can actually look straight ahead. So let's see if I can get used to that, right? But anyway, okay. Frontal extension, skull crusher. Just call it a skull crusher, because like if you look up frontal extension, I'm scared to look it up on the internet because, like, you know, a vast percentage of the internet is naughty. Anyway, but that's it there. The next day, deadlift, Romanian deadlift. I run into a similar issue here. With the deadlift, I do use accessories on my deadlift day. I do 2 types of pulls on my deadlift day. However, I still would have put the Romanian deadlift on the squat day, simply because most of this is just a quad dominant day. It's a quad day. Then you just call it power building because you're using a squat. That's not real power building in my opinion, but who am I to gatekeep, am I right? But anyway, that's how I would do it. So let's say for my deadlift programming, because like I said, I do use 2 variations. I do 3 sets of the main variation, 3 sets of the core work, or up to 3 sets, I should say, and anywhere between 2 to 4 sets of a variation that I can accumulate more volume. So for me, I can recover so much better from doing the sumo deadlift. However, I'm not a sumo deadlifter. For me, a real deadlift is a conventional. That's just for me. That's not what I push on others. That's not what I push on my clients. But for me personally, when I see deadlift, I think conventional deadlift. So, however, I'm lifting a lot of weight on the conventional deadlift. The conventional deadlift puts a significant amount of strain on my lower back and my ability to recover. But I found that the sumo deadlift is a close enough variation that if I improve my sumo deadlift, my conventional goes up and there's less fatigue. This is something called the stimulus to fatigue ratio. I'm getting a really high stimulus for less fatigue, whereas the conventional, I'm getting a really high stimulus, but really high amounts of fatigue as well, and that's something to consider. The issue is with a deadlift and a Romanian deadlift is typically the form is about the same. Generally speaking, there's a number of differences between a deadlift and a Romanian deadlift, given that, for example, the Romanian deadlift starts at the top, but they're both hip hinges. They both put a significant amount of strain on the lower back. So by doing heavy deadlifting, your ability to lift the most effective amount of weight on your Romanian deadlift is now hurt. So it's not as effective of an exercise as it could be if it was placed on a different day. Pull-ups, rows, curls. I do think that on a deadlift day, pull-ups, rows should be included. I do think that some type of pulling variation should be included on a deadlift day. One thing I would like to see here as well is some form of quad work. And this is where I think it would actually be more appropriate to do something like a leg press. I don't like leg extensions, but at least it's kind of like you do leg curls here because your hamstrings don't get hit nearly as much in the squat, and you do leg extensions here because your quads don't get hit nearly as much in the deadlift. That makes more sense to me. The overhead press day, I think it's abysmal for a variety of reasons. For one, you overhead press and then you just do different types of side raises, or raises in general. Why? Everything else got a variation. So at least, again, I want to see that same energy, you know? Like have a barbell overhead press, then do let's say a Z press, a dumbbell overhead press, a Smith machine press, a machine press. Why does this one only have one compound movement? That makes no sense to me. And then why is everything else a accessory? These ones, it might be written in the program and I just didn't see it, but I was elected to lead, not to read, and put this as a superset. You can shrug, then do your raises, and then you can do literally everything from here to here. You can do as a superset. And let's see if there's an option for some type of press as the second accessory. Nope. You just kind of rearrange what's already here. So not ideal. Let's look at the deload, and then because I'm pretty sure that the only differences between, let's say, round 1 to round 2 and 3 is just the load on that first set. So I do like the progression, generally speaking. I could think it could be written better, but it's fine. Let's look at the deload, however. So for one, this to me sounds like a novice program, and that already kind of makes it seem as if the necessity to deload might not be there. If you can recover and progress, you don't need to deload. And I do think deloading is important. I deload on a regular basis. However, I don't think, like I said earlier, I don't think anyone with a super heavy squat or someone who can no longer use linear periodization would use this program. And if someone is able to linearly progress and they're able to accomplish that with this, who am I to say anything? Because obviously they are of the genetic elite and they will succeed despite what they do, not because of it. But anyway, when it comes to deloading, for one, you are cutting down the volume, but one thing I would like to see is that volume be cut down for the accessories as well. If you're doing more accessory work, that's kind of where a lot of fatigue and volume accumulation happens. So if you're going to cut volume, so Mike Israetel says that Dr. Mike Israetel says that if you step on the brakes hard. And for the most part, I agree. So if you want to be a bit more clean with this, let's say for accessories, you do 4 sets, but then on deload weeks, you only do 2. Or let's say you do 3 sets. On deload weeks, just do 1. Do a top set and just do half the reps for 1 set for the same weight. And I think that'll be a much better deload than this. Because generally speaking, the only thing you're deloading is the main movement, and then everything else you're just about keeping the same. Because in the previous weeks, this was optional already, and chances are if you're doing a deload, you're not going to do it anyway. But if that's the case, then you're still doing this, and the reps are about the same as they were in the previous weeks, so it's kind of difficult to say that it's a deload. Incline bench press, or bench press, incline press, with dumbbell, barbell, or machine. So I'm sure that he wants you to change it, but that's a weakness to kind of include it as even an option, in my opinion. Or maybe not, I take that back. So sorry, I did not think about what you could do if you change this and then you still want to do incline pressing. My apologies. Anyway, still running into the same issues across all the other days. On a deadlift deload day, honestly, I would just deadlift and do pull-ups or rows and then call it a day there. Maybe you can get away with curls. But generally speaking, after that point, it's not so much useless as it is just questionable. So what do I give the Amazon Prime 4-week power building program on liftvault.com? I give it a C, because I just want you to see if this would work for you. But anyway, I think there are better systems out there. I think that there are worse systems out there. I like that this introduces you to the idea of using variations and accessories to push progression and volume. I love that a lot. I love how there is a 4-day split, how it focuses on progression, how it uses the main lift as what the workout is centered around. However, I also think that those are its weaknesses. It's too focused on that. It's too focused on variations and not so much as what is being used. It's so much focused on the movement, not so much on the muscles associated. So like I was saying, the bench press, this is the best example. In the bench press, you use chest, triceps, shoulders. In this bench press day, you're just going to do bench press, bench press, bench press, flies, and then triceps. Where's the shoulders in that? The shoulders are used in the bench press. Shouldn't they be strengthened? That's what it means to be a power builder. You want to have no weak links. If you are only as strong as your weakest link, you want to try to limit the amount of weaknesses that you have in your chain. So it does not make sense to do bench press, bench press, bench press, chest, and then no shoulder work. For one, I think that's an inefficient use of time and recovery resources. So not the best way to train. But like I said, I do love and I do like very much how the day is centered around this movement. But the squat, for example, you use your hamstrings and glutes in this as well. But they're not being the prime movers, so they still deserve some love, and they should be put in the place of the accessories. And you don't need more quads on top of a day where you're just squatting. So yeah, it's a C overall. Not a horrible program. It's not an atrocity or an affront to God, and that's good because those exist. But overall, yeah, it's pretty good. C. And on that, I will see you next time. I'm Karel Saquing, standstrength.com. And if you want to stand like an athlete, you got to strength like an athlete. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.